Okay, hi. So today we're going to be talking about some African fiction that I have read recently. So if you don't know, I am doing a project for 2025 where I'm focusing a portion of my reading on reading books from Africa. So books by African authors, books like nonfiction books about Africa, all that jazz. I'll link my announcement of what I was planning to do below. I'll also link a recent video that I made about nonfiction that I've read recently for this project, the first 4. I've already read more since then, which will be, stay tuned for another video. But today I'm going to focus in, I think, on some of the shorter novellas, short story collections, and stuff like that. And then hopefully make another video about some fiction, like full-length fiction that I've read recently. Okay, so the first one on my list is a short story called Unquiet on the Eastern Front. I got this on my Kindle through a press. I'll put it on the page. I got it for free. And this is a take on All Quiet on the Western Front, and it takes place during World War II in Africa, and you are following a white protagonist whose father had spent a lot of time in Africa, and he is fighting in the war within Africa and meets a monster. And it's very quick, very short. I enjoyed it. The author Wole Talabi had been on my radar, so I wanted to read something by him. The next one is a novella. It is called In the Company of Men by Vernique Tadjo. This is a fiction, but very much speaks to real life events. It's following a group of people, kind of a lot of different narrative pieces of the COVID of the Ebola epidemic. And I had read this around the same time as a nonfiction, Diamonds, Feuds, and Fevers, or a combination of those words in some order. And a lot of the things that he talked about in that book as having happened, very particular events with certain people, came up in this fiction. So it was like a fictionalized recounting of those events. The next one is The Curious Case of Dassoukine's Trousers. This is a short story collection by a Moroccan author, and they are all a lot of stories about someone telling a story. So there's generally a framing narrative in it, where they're in a setting and someone's telling a story and they kind of keep getting interrupted by the people they're with or the things that are happening around them. There's a lot of sharp, witty kind of energy to the books, or to each of the stories, and to the writing overall. For the most part, I enjoyed the books, I would recommend it. The next one is The Half-God of Rainfall. This is by a Nigerian author, a British Nigerian author, I believe, and it is a novella in verse, and it follows in the world that this author creates, the boundary. It's the world that we live in. The boundary is dissolved between humans and gods, and you follow this boy who is half god, and you kind of figure out his lineage and how he became really good at basketball. And then there's these more epic scenes between the gods and the gods of the African pantheon and gods of the Greek pantheon, and their interactions. And it was a very quick read. I thought it was quite interesting. If you like books in verse, you might like this. I tried to find an audiobook for it and I couldn't, so I listened to a preview of it so that I could kind of get the cadence of the author. So it was easier to kind of dive into and read to myself. Okay, the next one is Africa Risen, a new era of speculative fiction. This is not just by African authors. The collection contains books by many authors from the African diaspora, And it is very long. It's about 600 pages. I read it over the course of maybe like 3 months. I think that if you're interested in Afrofuturism or African futurism, this could be a good starting point if you like short stories. Overall, too, I think that there's a good grouping of different types of books. You have ones that are more speculative. You have ones that have more of a horror element to them. You have ones that are much more futuristic. You have ones that kind of lean more to the fantasy side. So I think that if you like things that are speculative in nature and you are interested in getting into, or you already enjoy Afro and African futurism, this would be a good short story collection to read, or an anthology, I guess. I like reading anthologies because it introduces me to a lot of different authors. So this one definitely did. There were ones that like stood out for me, and then I looked into the authors and looked into a book set of theirs that sounded intriguing and added them to my TBR. So this was a good opportunity for that. Okay, the next one is the first book in a duology called In the Shadow of the Fall, and the duology name is Guardians of the Gods. In this, you're following a protagonist, female protagonist, who is a little bit, I think she's late teens, early 20s, and she is an acolyte at a temple and has been for much longer than everyone else. And that leads her to a lot of frustration, and so she does something that she shouldn't, and while trying to get the gods' attention, and things kind of ensue from there. I would say in terms of novella, it wasn't my favorite. It has those telltale markings of trying to write a full-length novel, but not dedicating the actual energy to writing one. So it feels more like a draft of a full-length novel as opposed to a novella that is considered and deep and concise. It felt very bare bones. Your protagonist is a little bit annoying as a character. The author wasn't afraid to kind of take lives, but because the book was so short, it was hard for those to really matter. And then there were a lot of coincidences of things so that we could push the plot along because it needed to be pushed along because it was very short. I have the second book on audio from my library. I'm not really sure if I'm going to read it. I tried to get into it a few times, and I'm really just not motivated to, but if I do, I will include it in another video update in the future of this year. Okay, the last one on this list is called Chomz. I believe the author's name is Nanu. I came across this book because I'm trying to find African literature that isn't necessarily published in the United States. So going on to different independent bookstores and independent publisher websites, and this cover clearly caught my eye. It takes place in a small beach town, and it's basically a haunted house story. There is this protagonist, and she's in her 20s, and she's kind of a drunk, and she decides to come to this place to escape her family, and the place she stays in is very cheap, and maybe cursed, and has this caretaker of the house who everyone around is a little skeptical of. And there is a portal fantasy element to this. There is a talking goat. The protagonist is obsessed with social media and is like trying to become TikTok famous. So it was a kind of funny dichotomy of very modern, the very modern with like this ancient curse. And it was intriguing for me for about the first half, but then once the action started, it fell apart for me a little bit. The whole trying to become a TikToker thing just kind of disappeared, which I thought would have been really interesting with like the portal elements of what is going on in this haunted house story. And then it was just like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this is revealed, and then this happens, and then this other thing's revealed. And it was like things were happening, and I wasn't really understanding totally why. But there was a lot of description of like street foods and stuff like that. And I kept looking up like the names of it, and they all sounded really good. And then there was a lot of like Swahili blended into the book with short quips in Swahili or full conversations in Swahili that were not translated. I kind of like when books do that and blend languages in some capacity, so I did enjoy that element. Overall, I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but like the cover is chef's kiss. It's great. So that's all I have for short stories and novellas. Currently, I think that maybe my next one will probably be another nonfiction, but I have read some full-length novels as well, which I will get into in a future video. But for this one, that is all I have. So until next time, happy reading.